This is FightFans Radio.
Let's get ready to rumble! Oh my God! Unbelievable! Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier! It's time!
You're listening to New Mexico's only mixed martial arts and boxing podcast, The Low Blow, on AdamCombatSports.com and FightFans Radio. It is episode 118 of The Low Blow on FightFans Radio, USCombatSports.com, and SouthwestFight.com. I am Justin Goodrum, joined by Jorge Hernandez and Will McClay. What's up, guys?
Good evening, people.
Hi, everybody.
So today, guys, originally I think we had some not really earth-shattering news to talk about, but just within the last 10 minutes, some major news just went down. Before I get to that, let me just take care of the housekeeping issues first. As always, you can contact the show through Facebook, Twitter, or email through lowblow505@gmail.com, through @thelowblow or the Low Blow Podcast on Facebook. We're also on Stitcher, and we're also on FightFansRadio.com. Inside the chat room, you can ask us any questions you want, comments, angry kind of messages you want to send to us. We'll be happy to answer them with open arms. So let's break down this breaking news, and it concerns Strikeforce, and in my opinion, it makes me very happy. TMZ was really the first news outlet to report about Ronda Rousey. Basically, they stated, quote, this is from their website, Ronda Rousey just made MMA history, becoming the first female fighter to join the UFC. TMZ has learned Rousey, a former Olympian, has officially joined Dana White's MMA organization, and I guess automatically becomes the 135-pound women's champion. That has not been confirmed by the UFC. I don't know if TMZ is making an assumption or if that's really true. They said that TMZ has been told that they think that Ronda Rousey will defend her title sometime in 2013 against Sarah McMahon, Chris Cyborg, and rival Miesha Tate. There's just a lot of other stuff, yada, yada, yada. She was fighting in Strikeforce. She's undefeated. And it also mentions at the bottom here, very interesting, that Strikeforce will be running its last event in January before folding up shop for good. Ariel Helwani has some more info saying that sources closest to MMA fighting say that sources within the promotion say that both news items are true and that more information is expected to be released next week. It is unknown at this time when Rousey and the rest of the Strikeforce women's roster will make their debuts with the UFC. So, guys, I just want your initial thoughts. First, there's really two issues here. Really three. One is, women's fighting now going to be in the UFC. Two, Strikeforce ending and Showtime looking for another MMA partner. And three, where are all these Strikeforce fighters going to go? And are they, in fact, going to become members of the UFC roster? I mean, a lot of these guys have long-term contracts with Showtime. Not Showtime, with Strikeforce. So hopefully, even though they're owned by the same organization, I'm just kind of curious of the logistical issues, if there are any. So what are your guys' initial thoughts on this? This is really huge news.
I like it. I think we saw, I don't mean to get political, but I think what we saw on election night is just a change of what we're seeing just in this country and this country acceptance for different things. So for the UFC to finally have a women's division, I love it. For them to automatically give, Miss Rousey the title, have a tournament or something, man. Allegedly, of course. When it comes to the other fighters, of what's going to happen to them as soon as the Strikeforce does shut down, I think this opens the avenue for the UFC to have a lot more events and therefore honor the 2, maybe 3, 4 fight contracts that some of these guys actually have. I mean, it's not like they're bringing just an overwhelming amount. It's not like they're bringing 300-400 guys over. I mean, I'd be surprised if the lineup's over a good 60 dudes. So, I mean 60 guys who have multiple fights on their contract. So as far as them being honored, I think the UFC will stick that through and guarantee these guys the fights that they have left over.
Yeah, I'm just wondering in the sense of, especially with, Ronda Rousey signing to the UFC, it's just really interesting who she is going to fight. And just in comparison to Strikeforce, the attraction that the female fighters had on that network. Will we get the same, or you think it's going to be intensified? I kind of do like these fighters going over to the UFC, just for the simple fact that we've spoken about this before. It's confusing to see who the real champ is. So now it's kind of forces these fighters to face off each other. So it's also interesting that if these fighters are all going to be willing to do this transition over to the UFC. So it's a big move.
No doubt. So let's take these are pretty big issues. So I want to take the women's side of this first. We kind of had a conversation about if women could be a draw inside the UFC. I know we had kind of conflicting opinions about that. So where do you think we go from here? Is in fact Ronda Rousey signing with the UFC means that there's going to be a women's division, or is Dana White going to do one-off fights? What does this mean for women's MMA? I mean, there's issues with Invicta now, since you have to assume that there is going to be no more co-promotion with Invicta now that Strikeforce is going to be dead. Where does that leave that relationship with Invicta with these women? Do they already pretty much, since Shannon Knapp, who's the owner of Invicta Fighting Championships, is it going to be an issue of the UFC possibly poaching their talent to fill their women's division inside Zuffa? I mean, what is the future of women's MMA now? Because this is a pretty big deal. I mean, now the UFC is going to be making women's fights. I mean, you can't just have Ronda Rousey and two other girls there. I mean, the UFC always prides itself on divisions. I just can't see them just doing one-off fights. What do you guys think about this?
That's a very good point that you actually present there. What I think is going to happen is I don't think Dana White is actually going to go just all out here. I think he's going to bring in weight classes one at a time. So you start off with this 135-pound division, and then over the next year, maybe bring in one or two weight classes at a time. He's not going to go straight up atom weight all the way to 145 or 155 pounds. I just don't think he's going to go all out like that. He's going to test the waters and see how this weight class does. Ronda Rousey's still relatively young, and that weight class is pretty loaded in women's MMA. So I think they can test the waters with that division for a while and then see how the other classes come along. Will he go as far as bringing fighters in atomweight? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I certainly hope so. As far as them, poaching there into, I should say, the Invicta organization, they have a full female loaded, lineup that they have there. I think that'll come over time as the UFC does pull, these women out. I think Invicta, what they're doing right now, I mean, it's catching fire, I think. And Dana White is reaching into that specific, demographic or that side of women's MMA before it reaches its pinnacle. And it's a good move on his part. But as far as Invicta, I think it'll stay strong for the next probably year and a half, 2 years before the UFC little by little brings in these other weight classes.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder if it's going to be a different change in terms of the amounts of money that these fighters are going to get paid as well. I hope Dana White doesn't have that Mitt Romney attitude in terms of valuing women in the UFC.
Oh, so damn!
It's going to be interesting, and just in terms of the endorsements, the purses for the fight. So I wonder how that's going to be factored in, and then also with the Strikeforce fighters transitioning over to UFC, how different it's going to be with their money situation.
Hey,
Sure.
Will, let it go, man. We won, man.
No, man, I can't.
Took the title.
I'll quit on Sunday.
You gotta enjoy the victory for a little bit, right? But going back with this women's fighting in general, compare this to boxing, because we really haven't seen a women's fighter in the sport of boxing, I think, captured kind of the imagination that the mainstream sports media as Ronda Rousey has so far. So can you kind of compare? This is kind of uncharted territory for combat sports as a whole. I mean, really, if you think about it, within the last 5 years, Gina Carano, Chris Cyborg, and Ronda Rousey, they've made pretty much more noise than any other really female combat sports personality in history, don't you think? I mean, it was really Mia St. John, but you can miss Holly Holm in terms of actual accomplishments, but in terms of mainstream credibility, they don't come close. So in terms from like the kind of the boxing point of view, this is kind of uncharted territory. So do you have faith that women's MMA could break through and become kind of that women's tennis that it's accepted, or do you think it could be, the WNBA of MMA, so to speak, and people not taking it as seriously as the guys' side of the sport? I mean, where do you guys fall on that?
Well,
I mean, I just
that's
wonder how it's going to be marketed. With the pay-per-view sales. I mean, we've seen it before. They've done pretty good in comparison to boxing. I mean, that's a good question that you pose. I mean, of course, people are going to say, Layla Ali. I think she has probably got the most notoriety just for the simple fact of her name. I mean, of course, she had skills too, but just the marketing technique is really going to be interesting. I wonder how different it's going to be in terms of how they did it for Strikeforce, and then just to ask the real question: Are people going to be as hyped to buy a pay-per-view? Because in boxing, of course, the female fighters really brought it home in the Olympics. I mean, my goodness. So
Yep.
I don't know, if they're going to merge. That's a good question, but we haven't heard much since the Olympics. So, and I know it's pretty different in terms of UFC, but I think it's going to really come down to the marketing technique of this, and then also the opponents. That's a huge question for me. Is just who are they going to be fighting? If these female fighters from Strikeforce for some reason aren't able to strike deals with UFC, yeah, I mean she automatically becomes the champion. No adversaries. It's pretty interesting. I mean, she's gonna need those not just opponents but worthy opponents to really get those pay-per-view draws.
And that's a very good point that Will actually brings up, the caliber of opponents that you're actually going to be setting up for her. You don't have to go all out right away with the first fight, I don't think. You don't put Cyborg in there with her. You're going to put someone else with her.
Really? You don't do that fight
Nope,
first?
you do not.
Okay.
You do not. You build up that division to leave people anticipating more. You basically introduce Rousey to the mainstream. The mainstream fans that watch the UFC and might not be completely accepting of women's MMA. She dominates her first fight, maybe fights someone else on short notice, and then you set up a huge UFC card where you have one other male championship fight. It does 750 plus, I think, man. If
Really?
you set it up that way with Cyborg and another big title, maybe whether it's maybe a John Jones or the winner of this GSP fight, if they do it that way, and put Cyborg on that undercard, or maybe even as the main event or the co-main event, it'll sell well. So you do not do the Rousey Cyborg fight right away. You wait.
Two things. One, you said that you don't think Ronda Rousey should be automatically the 135-pound champion. Why? Considering Jose Aldo, was automatically the featherweight champion once he crossed over.
Just because of the fact, it's a whole new promotion. I just don't understand how you're automatically dubbed as champion.
She's the number one ranked fighter in the division, though, right?
But still, number one ranked. I mean, how much merit does that actually have? What if you put her against somebody and she loses?
Who else is number one? Who else is number one for her?
No, I'm just saying, if she's number one, I just don't think you should be given a championship for a promotion that you've never fought for. Yeah, you're ranked number one in that, but at least fight somebody. Even if she would fight. It's the first fight. All right, here's a championship. Since it's the first fight, of course, the winner's going to be the best one pronouncing it. Then you deserve it. But I just don't think you give it to them as soon as you bring this new division into it. Just never made sense for me. It didn't make sense for Aldo either. It's not like, it's not like it's the same promotion where you're like grandfathered in. You know what I mean? It's a whole different organization, a whole different company, whole different league. So I'm not a fan of just awarding these individuals for being champions in another promotion. It just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, earn it. Even if it's your first fight, then fine. So be it. As long as they earn it, I think you'll be all right.
I'm going to have to agree with Jorge on that one, man. I kind of like the idea of the tournament. So that still stems back. I mean, that would just be a major attraction, with this transition from Strikeforce to UFC. Why not have this tournament? Of course, who's going to be in the tournament, but whoever the winner of that tournament, I think they would be more respected as a champion versus just a market technique. So I have to agree with Jorge in that regard.
I was on your guys' bandwagon until this year with the flyweight tournament, and what we saw with the first bout with Ian McCall and Demetrius Johnson with just the score fiasco, the scorecard fiasco in Australia, and then they had to fight again. And then it's lost a lot of momentum and should have been a lot of attention paid towards the flyweights. Instead, it was just kind of mirrored in controversy and no one really cared. And I think within a tournament, you risk, people getting injured. That means you have to add alternates. I just don't really like that idea. I mean, I'll give you the fact that within a new title within the UFC, it should be fought for. I think even though I don't really mind Ronda Rousey being given a title, I mean, I'm willing to see her fight for it. I have no problem with that. But the second part with Jorge you talked about is a title fight being paired with a fight with Ronda Rousey and Cyborg. I have to disagree with you there because to me, Ronda Rousey, arguably, now that she's in the UFC, in terms of drawing ability, I think she's the third biggest draw in that company. It's really GSP, John Jones, and even though Ronda Rousey hasn't drawn a dime worth of pay-per-view money, in terms of potential, I can see her being easily number 3. And I just pairing it, I don't think she needs a John Jones. Why? I think if there's going to be a title fight, pair it with the belt that needs the attention the most. Pair it with a title with Jose Aldo that needs the attention. The flyweight title, the bantamweight title, even the lightweight title. I mean, why put GSP? Why put John Jones on the same card with Ronda Rousey? That makes no sense. Because then you have, unless you're doing some kind of UFC 100 blowout in Dallas Cowboys Stadium, there's no point in doing that. She's already a draw on her own, and especially since I agree with you to build up the title fight, have her destroy somebody a little bit below her level, and then build up to a number 1 contendership, and maybe have her fight Cyborg hypothetically. To me, you have 3 fights of buzz, 3 fights of armbar finishes. It builds up. She can do it on her own because that first women's title fight, especially if you do it on Fox or if it's a main event of a pay-per-view, it's going to be just the novelty factor because they're women. It's going to be because Ronda Rousey has a big mouth. It's going to be because she's an amazing athlete, an Olympian, and she armbars people. It's a perfect combination. So I don't think you need to use gimmicks, other titles, other big draws to really make Ronda credible as a main eventer. I mean, if it was, somebody with a lot of charisma, maybe like Sarah Kaufman, no offense, or somebody, like a Sarah McMahon or somebody who doesn't really seek the spotlight, I think you might be right, Jorge. But with Ronda Rousey, she's a bona fide star. I mean, look who broke the story. It was TMZ. I mean, how many times have you seen Ronda Rousey on TMZ.com? I mean, she's on there hosting the show with Harvey Levin and the other dude with the dreadlocks. So I think she's already a star.
Isn't that what the UFC right now needs? Is something on a UFC 100 level to bring the sport back from the mishaps that they've actually had? It's not even necessarily mishaps. It's just a string of bad luck that they've actually had to bring the mainstream back.
You only need one main event, like Anderson Silva GSP. Everybody will forget about the bad pay-per-views. If everybody stays healthy next year, everybody's going to praise the UFC. Oh, what an amazing job they did. And they didn't do anything. The fighters got healthy. It wasn't Dana White wasn't a genius. He put the fights that obviously should go together. It doesn't take a genius to do that. It takes genius in promoting and creating stars in which guys have limited personality, making them cross over to a mainstream audience. I mean, it's easy to put GSP, Anderson Silva together. It's easy to put a Cyborg, Ronda Rousey together. That's a no-brainer. Put Alice over Raymond. It's easy to see that the Diaz brothers. But the question is for the UFC is how do you make Benson Henderson a star? How do you make people care about, Renan Barao? How do you make them care about a Jose Aldo? I mean, that's the bigger question. I mean, it's easy. These guys that already have charisma, Chael Sonnen can talk for days and hours and they can care about him. But how do you make those guys that don't have that enthusiastic personality to do that? And that's the challenge.
What would be the smarter idea for UFC to do? Put her as a co-main event in a pay-per-view as her first fight, or put her as a main event on a Fox card?
That's a really good question, man. Because with the scheduling going on now, I think there's going to be a UFC on Fox in January. I think Clay Guida's supposed to fight on that. In fact, we have news on that later. But that's a really good question. To me, I agree with your approach on kind of building it up. I think the question is always, man, you always run into that factor of what they did with Mirko Cro Cop. They want to build Mirko Cro Cop. Look what happened to him. He got head kicked viciously by Gabriel Gonzaga, violently. They had Randy Couture cage side to make that fight with Randy and Cro Cop. Cro Cop gets knocked out. That fight never happens. I mean, the rest is history. So I don't know. I think it's awfully risky, especially if he faces somebody like a Sarah McMahon, who's a great grappler as well. I mean, I just don't see her being armbarred immediately by Ronda Rousey. So personally, I put her on Fox because you want the big rating, and especially if this latest edition of UFC on Fox tanks, I think you're gonna have to put her on there. So, guys, I want to talk about kind of the male side. We talked about the women a lot, but I want to get your opinion on which fighter from the Strike Force side of things do you think will make the most immediate impact in the UFC? Gilbert Melendez. I know, Jorge, you've been talking about him. You think he's going to make a huge impact? Nate Marquardt, Luke Rockhold, Daniel Cormier. There's certainly question marks about Josh Barnett. There's Josh Thompson, who, by the way, is a huge Obama hater. I recommend do not follow him on Instagram if you are a Democrat, because you will hate this guy 100%. So, nevertheless, there's him. There's Tim Kennedy, Rafael Cavalcante. Who are you guys looking at to make a huge impact in the UFC?
Melendez and Daniel Cormier, I think, just because of Daniel Cormier recently. I don't know if you guys saw his comments saying that right now he feels that he's better, or has faced. I shouldn't say that he feels he was better. He feels that he's faced better competition than John Jones did when John Jones was 9-1, when they had the same amount of fights. And I think he might be right. This guy just dominated, the Strike Force. He has great hands, for heavyweight, and also, he's no joke when it comes to wrestling. He United States Championship, 5-6 times, I think. So Cormier would, and then just Gilbert Melendez, just because of I think I enjoy watching Melendez fight. I mean, I don't know what it is about him, but I think his style can actually, just because he is a wrestler. I mean, BJJ and a Muay Thai fighter, he can actually go ahead and did you see Erica call me out? She disagrees with DC's comments there, but I think.
What about your boy Jacare, man?
Man, I don't know.
I like Jacare.
Jacare be doing it, man. He comes to fight. Every time I've seen him on Strike Force, he's always bringing it, man. I like that. that crocodile or alligator thing he's doing.
Me too.
He's got some personality in there, man.
He does.
And then my man, I was excited about KJ Noons for a while, man, but then he started slipping. So I don't know. He still might be able to bring some type of excitement. And then Tyrone Woodley, man, you think he's gonna bounce back or what?
I think so. I think he's a lot like Ben Askren in some aspects, which is not good, and that he's boring. And I think he's a welterweight, and I think it's a kiss of death in that division, man. If you're boring and if you are just a grinder, I think you need to be ultra. You need to be killing guys. You need to be dominating them. And I think for Tyron Woodley, we'll see. I just think if he loses a fight, I think he might be toast rather quickly. I don't think he'll be cut, but in terms of being a relevant title contender, I don't see him sticking in there. But I think the potential is as an athlete, he's really good, no doubt.
And also, Will brings up a good point with Jacare. Who knows what he would be able to do? This guy, he has 3 losses, but technically 2 of them are what I call, in the prime of his career. His first loss was in his first career fight. So definitely someone who can make a noise, or at least make some fights exciting in that. I mean, what about, I'd love to see a Bisping Jacare fight.
That'd be interesting. You know what?
At a catchweight of some sort, or even, maybe screw it. They're right there in middleweight where they're at.
Yeah. Well, to me, I think Luke Rockhold has a lot of potential.
Yeah.
I think he's kind of, and Tim Kennedy, I think to me, Tim Kennedy, I know people like Brian Stann. I like him as an individual, but to me, I think Tim Kennedy is the real Brian Stann. He's a Brian Stann that has all around MMA ability. And I think certainly, even though we've seen Tim Kennedy kind of, go through a little bit of hard times, I think he's still going to be hugely relevant in that middleweight division, considering Anderson Silva. I mean, his days are numbered as champion, just in terms of him, being around in the sport. But I think Luke Rockhold has a lot of potential. Yeah. He's flashy. He's cocky. He's young. There's no doubt he has the it factor to me to be a huge star. I think it's that one fight with Michael Bisping that's them talking trash. I think he could be a huge draw for the UFC potentially. So certainly this is a huge deal for Strikeforce. For the sport of MMA. There's one more thing before we move on, and it kind of relates to our topic later on in the main event of topics. But now Showtime, it appears that they're going to lose their main source of MMA. Do you see themselves, getting out of the mixed martial arts business and focusing more on boxing? I mean, this has really been a huge year for Showtime on the boxing side. They've really done well, with the Manny Pacquiao fights. They have a really good doubleheader this weekend. They've really done a good job of getting quality fights on there and really rivaling HBO as a top premium sports channel for boxing. So do you see them focusing more on that side, or do you see them taking a chance on MMA again? Or should they at all?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think they lost the. I mean, what else is out there for them to actually pull and bring?
NASCAR.
Hey, they got a NASCAR show on there already.
Yeah.
So.
Or to even create or help build from the ground up. I mean, everyone else who's established is already with the networks that they have contracts with. So it's going to be very difficult. I think Showtime is definitely going to apply themselves more to the boxing, and they've done one hell of a job this year. I'm blown away just by the quality of fights that they've been able to put, great cards that they've been able to have. So, I mean, I think why not, drop all that money on the boxing, see if you can bring back a few pay-per-views. Just kind of sucks that, we're not going to hear Morrow on Showtime doing MMA fights anymore. I mean, but he's doing a lot of other random stuff when it comes to MMA, but I'm looking forward to hearing him on the boxing. But
his health is in question, man. I don't want
it is.
I think he posted a message on his Facebook saying he's getting better, but I just think whether or not, even if Strikeforce was to go on, I think he's out of commission for a while. So hopefully we give his well wishes to him, and hopefully he gets better soon.
Jorge, let me ask you something real quick, man. For the Super Six that Showtime did in that tournament, of course, it went through some drama. But do you think they learned enough from producing that tournament? And since they're going to be losing Strikeforce, to produce another tournament that would be successful? And the second part of this question is,
no.
what weight class would you say if they were to do it? Do you think would be successful?
It's kind of difficult when it comes to the weight. I mean, it has to be with one of, the lower weight classes, maybe the 154-pound division, but I don't know how. Well, especially if you think about it, it might be the 154-pound division, just because they have Austin Trout, they have Canelo, or they did have Canelo for the last fight. I don't know what kind of contract he has with them, and who knows what they can build from there. But if they do it with a weight class, it's going to be that one or one of the lower weight classes. But do I hope they do another tournament? I mean, there was a lot of problems, not even problems, just mishaps that happened with the last one, with a lot of guys being injured. I think they're better off investing in good, just premium one-time fights. You know what I mean? Not necessarily a tournament. Just go ahead and drop your money on these guys to fight, these all-out wars or these good fights. So I think that's the way.
And then another one that went pretty highly unnoticed was Abner Mares, Joseph Becco, Vic Darcinian. That was another tournament that they have, but of course it didn't get marketed like the Super Six. But
it didn't have a lot of those guys were were foreigners who didn't really who aren't really known to the American public. When it came to the 167-pound weight class, you had a few Brits, you had a couple of Brits in there. You had a handful, or excuse me, like 3 Americans, I believe. So guys that were recognized, and even you brought in a gold medalist in Andre Ward from the Olympics. So that's what made that tournament stand out. The lower weight class that you mentioned, that didn't have the pedigree or the talent, not necessarily the talent, I should just say the recognition of the other division. So, it was a good division, and they only had 4 guys as opposed to 6 that they had with the original 167-pound division. Mm-hmm. So 68, excuse me. And, that was able to work. So if they do quick 4-man tournaments, by all means do it. But I think they should just invest in, one-time big fights as opposed to a tournament and risk a lot.
Fair enough.
So pretty much since the Strikeforce news just broke, it's going to pretty much be a shortened version of the Standing 8 count. But before we get to some Holly Holm news, I just want to break down this 3-title fight card that's happening on January 12th. It'll be Gilbert Melendez facing Pat Healy for the lightweight title. It'll be Luke Rockhold, the middleweight champion, facing Lorenz Larkin. I know a lot of people hate that fight, but the last fight of Strikeforce, what can you do? And it'll be Nate Marquardt, who got really that knockout of the year over Tyron Woodley, taking on Tariq Safardine for the welterweight title. So In addition, also Daniel Cormier will be on that card. He'll fight Dion Starling. So that'll pretty much mark the end of that promotion. But Jorge, you have some news about Holly Holm changing opponents for her fight coming up in December.
Yeah, unfortunately, the four-time world title holder Miriam Lamari had to pull out of her fight. This was going to be a rematch between her and Holm. Lamari is recognized probably as one of the top 30, 25, 30 pound-for-pound fighters in the world. She did cite a shoulder injury. She even sent over Lenny Fresquez, who is Holly Holm's promoter, shots of her X-ray to actually, just show, what, I'm not lying. Here you go. In comes Australian Diana Prezek, 11-1, ranked number 1 by the WBC, but she's coming up in weight. They're both meeting at light welterweight. Holly's coming down from welterweight, but she's fought at light welterweight before. So this is slight of a mismatch for Diana Prezek because Holm is actually a former light welterweight, and it's always difficult for someone to move up in weight and have the same speed and power, unless your name's Manny Pacquiao. So when it comes to the new fight on December 7th at the Route 66 Casino, the pound-for-pound number 1 champion, Holly Holm, will be fighting Diana Prezek, just as a heads up to everybody.
So let's get the 3 rounds, guys. Who wants to take it first?
You got
I think I don't have anything right at the top of the brain right now, man. Things have been kind of slow, man. But I can say that I'm extremely excited about the Garcia and the Zab Judah fight. I'm mad that we have to wait until it's next year, but it's the beginning of the next year. But we were just mentioning that in terms of Garcia, of his skills really being tested against up-and-comers or versus veterans. Well, Zab Judah's been able to pretty much, to a certain extent, recreate his boxing career. The only, the downfall that I saw was, of course, that Lucas Matiste fight. I don't believe Zab won that. But other than that fight, he's been on the come up. So yeah, Zab is, he's definitely not a journeyman. He's a veteran of the sport, but he still has a shot at superpower. I think that Zab is just like, I hope he just doesn't, for all the Zab Judah fans, I hope he doesn't drop the ball because, this guy's got so much talent, but every time he gets matched up in a big fight, man, he drops the ball. We saw it with Cotto, and you remember Zab, he lost to Amir Khan. And that's not like a bad thing. Khan's been having, a couple of bad fights lately. Hasn't turned out his way. He's still a decent boxer in my opinion, but the way that Zab went out on that fight, I really hope we don't see that against Garcia. So it really has the potential to be a good fight and a great way to kick off the new year.
I guess very quickly, I want to talk about Epics hosting all the Klitschko fights, man. How do you feel about that, Will?
Hosting Klitschko fights?
Oh yeah, on Epics again. Looks like they've been fighting on this network a few times and on the websites. So if you want to check them out this weekend, they 14-day trial.
Oh man,
that's right.
I think that's gonna bomb. I just don't know, man. These guys are like, man, again and again, these guys are machines. But we already mentioned this earlier tonight with the women's UFC. I think it's been, the problem with the Klitschko's too. These opponents. It's no matter what network or what type of promotion. I think the biggest draw probably right now to the Klitschko was the unfortunate death of, Emmanuel Stewart. People are wondering, how his new trainer is going to produce possibly some new skill sets or a new type of fighting style in the ring. But other than that, I really don't know where the interest would lie.
Mm-hmm. I'll just go off real quick. Just something short. As you all know, Hurricane Sandy just totally did a number on the East Coast, and saw this really interesting video of Chris Weidman on MMAfighting.com with Ariel Helwani. It's 45 minutes of him basically going through his neighborhood, just going through all the damage that happened to his house. Pretty much he went through just how the water just got through his garage, and it was salt water, not fresh water, so pretty much destroyed a lot of personal belongings, got into his living room. And yeah, he had a pretty good attitude about it, and just pretty much send your well wishes to him and to the rest of the victims of that tragic storm. I'm sure the Red Cross has plenty of has a phone number on their website. Please, if you have any money, please donate. There's a terrible tragedy. Hopefully, Chris Weidman. I know he has a fight in December. Hopefully, the UFC can push it back. I'm sure they desperately don't need him on that card to make it successful. I'm sure they can spare a couple of months to move him off that card if he just can't. It's not available to fight. So seems like the storm is it's past, and hopefully everybody can kind of move on and still help out because it's a pretty devastating tragedy that we saw the last couple of weeks.
Well said, my friend.
So guys, let's talk about the World Series of Fighting real quickly. Took place on Saturday on Versus. I was flipping the channel back and forth. I'm not gonna lie. As I said, we were talking about favorite movies off the air, and Rudy was on NBC because the Notre Dame Fighting Irish is playing. So I guess they wanted to show Rudy right after. So I was watching that and the World Series of Fighting. I just want to get your guys' thoughts on the card. There's some technical glitches. I think the first, 10 minutes, I thought I was attending some kind of Japanese rave. Like the screen kept zooming back and forth. I thought I was gonna throw up. Like I almost turned the channel. I got a massive headache, and I thought that was it. I couldn't watch anymore. Luckily they fixed it, and there's no more problems throughout the rest of the card. But Jorge, you saw it. Just your thoughts on Miguel Torres gets defeated. Tyrone Spong looks impressive. Not much here. Too much to get excited about. But what were your thoughts on this whole production?
Well, the thing I was most excited about to actually see is Tyrone Spong in his, MMA debut. The guy's, if you ask me, and you ask a lot of people who are into kickboxing, he's a legend. I mean, the guy was 68-6 with 42 knockouts as a kickboxer. Just incredible. So, I don't think he was really too tested. I didn't like the mismatches that happened in these fights. The Anthony Johnson opponent. I mean, come on, the Miguel Torres and Mario Morales fight. That was probably the closest out of the main card, I should say.
That was sad to see.
That was the
that
most
broke
competitive.
my heart.
But how the hell did I don't know how one of the judges had Miguel Torres winning that fight, man.
Yeah, that's insane.
It just didn't make sense to me. And then Anthony Johnson, what did we learn about him? Head, don't poke him in the eyes. You won't get knocked out.
He was like the Incredible Hulk, man. That was the button you did not push.
But come on. The level, the caliber of opponent that his opponent was, I shouldn't even have been in there, man.
Sure. I think other MMA experts, in particular, MMA fighting, Lou Thomas had a very good point for Tyrone Spong. I mean, this is this guy's first ever professional MMA fight. Mm-hmm. He needs to fight a scrub. Just to get used to the cage. I mean, put him in there against a wrestler to take him down would be horrible. And for this game, you just imagine, just ruining this guy within 2 fights. He fights 2 wrestlers and then he quits. I mean, that'd be horrible. You're robbing this guy of his future potential. So I understand with the Anthony Johnson kinda, just because it's his first time at 205. I mean, in terms of that division outside of Zuffa, it's not that good, to be honest, anyway. So I'm not that outraged about it. But just your quick thoughts on this World Series of Fighting becoming some kind of a factor in the mainstream MMA market. Is it? I mean, they have to buy time on there. They got 200,000 viewers. That's more than the MLS gets on that network regularly. Do you see them becoming a factor at all, or do you just see it becoming another, IFL affliction, so on?
No, just because it's got NBC money actually backing them up, I think they'll be okay. I mean, they might reach the level that Strikeforce was actually at, but a lot of these guys, and Arlovsky he didn't hide it. He was using this as a platform to get back to the UFC. That's exactly what he's trying to do. And if all these, ultimately that's what all these guys want. But if all of them are going with the mentality and presenting that, it kind of hurts NBC for people, to be saying that on their own network. But I like it. It's a good little spinoff that's going on there. I guess of Strikeforce, to see another outlet for these guys to come on. Obviously, you can't put all these guys in the UFC. You can't. They're going to have to build their way back up, like Arlovsky is doing. But in the meantime, I don't mind seeing them on NBC Sports to actually build themselves back up. Did it surprise you that Jay-Z Cavalcante wasn't on NBC Sports Network? Yet they had him on Sherdog.
There
That's
was
right.
there was some funny stuff going on with the undercard, and people were talking about that on the Twitter feed. Just with that, and just with the fact that they only showed three undercard fights and not the rest of them, they wanted some. Just in case the card ended quickly, they wanted more fights to show. It just seemed like the production just seemed kind of off. I don't know why that is, considering that with the WEC, a lot of the graphics and stuff like that I thought was under Versus control. So yeah, that was weird. Also, Michael Chavello did the. Was that me? Was Michael Chavello did the undercard play-by-play, right?
I believe so.
And now,
Eric might be able to tell us whether he did or not, but I think so. I only caught a couple of the fights in the
okay,
undercard.
because then on the main one, Todd Harris did the main card, which didn't really make any sense. I mean, he just totally wasted. I think Erica. Anyway, I think with Chavello, I mean, you just wasted his time on that network. I mean, just him doing the undercard didn't really make any sense. So overall, hopefully, they find some direction and we'll see what happens. Got a little bit of limited time here, so I want to get into kind of this kind of quick review of this kind of the sport of boxing. I mean, we already talked about the UFC kind of in 2012, but I want to get your guys' thoughts on just overall kind of the health of the sport. I think for the first time, I really see new bright stars that can carry the era of boxing away from Mayweather Pacquiao. Do you guys agree? Canelo, Brandon Rios, Andre Ward. I'm sure there's plenty of guys I'm missing, but it just seems like the mainstream consciousness. Whenever people get hyped up for a fight, it's either Mayweather or Pacquiao. But for the first time this year, and the numbers back it up, there's other fighters making some noise in 2012. So do you think we can finally move on from whenever there's a big pay-per-view fight? We don't have to mention Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather. No disrespect, they're great fighters, but at some point, the sport has to move on.
And I believe it does, and I think right now it's actually doing it. You got a lot of young fighters, primarily, you said Andre Ward. The other two guys that are next up and coming are going to be, or excuse me, three guys I should say, just because of name, Chavez Jr. You have to
Yep.
say.
Mm-hmm.
Also on, excuse me, what am I talking? Broner, excuse me, Adrian
Yeah.
Broner would be another
Oh.
one. So, and also Canelo. It's those three guys I think that are going to carry the torch and the mantle for this next generation of boxing. And here's the thing, two of them aren't even 23 years old yet. So, I mean, this is just incredible with the notoriety that these guys are going to gain, and also the fans that they're actually going to bring in. And it's something that the sport needs. It's something, that we needed another American superstar, and Adrian Broner, I think, is going to bring that to us. And thankfully, he's coming along right. He's coming on right at the right time when we do need him. And while these organizations, Top Rank and Golden Boy don't want their guys to fight one another, but as long as they're willing to put their best two guys against one another, or at least brawlers or good fighters against one another, I say case in point, Top Rank had Alvarado against Rios, and then this weekend we're seeing a Golden Boy do Lara against Vanis Martirosyan. That's a good fight. That's a very good fight. Going to be a great technical fight, I think, this weekend, which I'm excited for. So as long as these promotions don't want each other's guys to fight one another, but yet they'll let them beat each other up, then I'm all for it.
Absolutely, man. I mean, this boxing, boxing's been around for centuries. It always, in my opinion, it'll always be okay. There's no individuals that are going to just hold the sport. Like we've been saying, Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather, of course, that's like the mainstream. But it's always survived. There's always going to be new up and comers coming about, and I just think this has been a great year for boxing. I mean, one of the guys too, that Golovkin, man, I think he's really going to make a name for himself. Man.
Mm-hmm.
And Lucas Matiste, and it's a different type of styles of. I mean, not even different type of styles. I don't even should say that, but it's before we had a lot of we had a lot of flash that was familiar with boxing. I mean, one thing that I would probably have to say that I miss about boxing with the mainstream is just no one really comes to immediate mind when it comes to that crazy just knockout puncher like we had in like Mike Tyson, just driving people absolutely insane with that knockout power. I mean, Manny Pacquiao, he was doing it for a while, but his last couple of fights, it's obvious that's not happening. So of like we have like Andre Ward, you mentioned guys like Canelo, Brandon Rios. These guys are really good, decent punchers. But I think if one thing that's missing from me right now in boxing is just that crazy, devastating puncher that everybody's talking about, they're raving about. Fighters definitely getting nervous in the ring when they see him across from themselves, and we just need that in boxing right now. But in terms of the sport, I never thought that, certain individuals are going to make or break the sport. It's been around too long for that. It'll always survive. And speaking of which, one of my favorite fighters, Sugar Ray Robertson, his opponent, Hall of Famer Carmen Basilio, he died today at the age of 85, and he was just a rough and tough fighter that really gave Robertson some problems and even have defeated him. So, I mean, it just has so much history, and it just proves again and again that boxing just continues to reinvent itself. So I'm never worried about the sport just dying. I mean, it slows down. We saw a slow year in UFC, and people were panicking, saying that it's going away, and it's just crazy. That's what sports do sometimes. It's not always exciting as previous years, but UFC is a tremendously young in comparison to boxing. But I think that both sports are around to stay, and I don't think particular individuals are gonna make and break them. So we have people across the world that are hungry enough to always be fighters. Yeah. So I mean, also as long as we have poverty, we're always going to have fighters.
That's a good point. That's what I was going to say. There was a quote. I don't remember who said it, but as long as there's poverty, there's always going to be good boxers. Or boxing will always live as long as poverty lives. And Jay, I wanted to ask you right away. I guess as a casual / forcing you to become a hardcore fan over here.
No, you sound like I despise the sport.
No,
I don't at all.
Not at all. But I think we're rubbing off on you in a good way. But still,
no, yeah.
Because I guess the struggles that we saw in UFC with the cards not happening and the amount of good fights that boxing was able to put on, do you think boxing once again gained a lot of traction this year?
It did. I absolutely do. I think you saw that with the night that you saw Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. and Canelo fight at the same night, and both those cards doing well with numbers. I mean, the numbers bear that out. And so I think it is slowly gaining traction. But I think I agree with Will. I think it's going to take that kind of charismatic, knockout superstar to kind of cross over and break through to kind of that mainstream sports audience. But I think for now, the sport of boxing is in good hands regardless. It's always going to be there. And I think now with these new young and up and coming fighters, the sport, it looks bright. And I just hope that with the mainstream outlets, it's just annoying that they keep focusing on only two guys and not giving respect to what's really going on in the sport. Because I think in 2012, this has been you can pretty much say that the sport of boxing has been more, I think in terms of fights, been more exciting than MMA. I think, in my opinion, I think it's created more brighter stars. I mean, you can maybe say that in terms of MMA, Ronda Rousey's probably the most well-known star, but in terms of bright young future prospects and future, guys that are going to be huge draws, I think boxing has MMA numbers this year. So I think, it's been really good to see, and hopefully, the UFC is going to be back in full force. The Strikeforce thing pretty much changes the game. So I would just love to see, one weekend we have, a million pay-per-view buy potential fight in boxing, and the next weekend we have a huge UFC. I mean, that's just be amazing to have, 2 million pay-per-view buys in 1 month. I mean, that is to be awesome. So with both sports doing well, I think it's nothing but good news for fans of both. So guys, we have a little bit of time here, but I want to talk about these cards real quick. UFC in China, it's an early start, 7 o'clock our time. Rich Franklin, Kung Lee's the main event. You have Thiago Silva. You have Paulo Thiago, Takanori Gomi, soft spot in my heart, no doubt, on this card too. The main event, just real quickly, who do you see taking this fight, Rich Franklin or Kung Lee?
I know Eric is going to hate me for this, but I mean, I'm hoping for Kung Lee. Hopefully he comes in there, doesn't get knocked out, man. that's the potential you have with Kung Lee. He might be able to drop a huge kick and knock Franklin out, but he's also, I guess that's what makes it exciting for me, at least, knowing that he might knock somebody out or he might get knocked out. So, I don't know. I think I'm gonna go Kung Lee, man. But that's just, I love the guy. Oh, he'll pass out before he gets knocked out. All right, Eric, I'm gonna see you.
I'll take Rich Franklin. I love Kung Lee too. I'm a huge fan of his, but I just think Rich Franklin I think he has something left in the tank, and I think, especially whatever division he picks, 205 or 185, I can't keep a track. He keeps switching, bouncing back and forth. But I think Rich Franklin, if he sticks to one division, I think he can make some noise. I don't think he could be champion or even be in a number one contendership bout, but I think he can string, 3 good wins together and then fight a contender and then call it a day before he retires. So we'll see what happens. And nevertheless, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, just to give you the odds on that, Rich Franklin's a 3.5 to 1 favorite, and Kung Lee's a 2.5 to 1. So I mean,
yeah,
I'm shooting in the dark here, I think.
Yeah, it's a fun fight. I think people were saying, "Why is this fight happening?" I think people are hardcore MMA fans who want to see rising prospect versus veteran. People move up and down the ladder, but sometimes this is a cool fight to see. I think both guys have kind of passed their prime, if we're being honest here, but I'm still down to see it. I mean, I won't be up at 7 a.m., but when I do see it, I'll be excited to look forward to it. But let's break down this Showtime boxing this weekend and HBO going on. I know we're kind of running out of time here, but you guys just Showtime has this doubleheader going on Friday and Saturday. It has on the Friday part Gary Russell Jr. On the Saturday has I think a triple header. You get Abner Mares taking on Mesmo Moreno, Leo Santa Cruz taking on Victor Zelta, and Alfredo Angulo taking on Raul Cesares. And on HBO, Vanis Majorian takes Islandi Lara, and then Mikey Garcia taking on Jonathan Victor Barros. What do you guys think? Which fight do you think is the best out of those 6 fights that we're going to see this weekend?
Man, I'm going with just because I'm excited to see it. Is that well, I mean, if you're going based off of odds, the Abner Mares Anselmo Moreno fight is going to be based off of Vegas odds, a more competitive. I mean, neither guy's more than a 2 to 1 favorite. As far as good technical skill in boxing, I'm going to watch the Vanis Martirosyan and Erislandy Lara just because of the implications of this fight. Lara has 1 loss, and it was a robbery that he had against Paul Williams. He just got flat out robbed. One of the worst decisions I've seen in the past 10 years. Vanis Martirosyan, he's 32-0, 20 KOs. He's a tough guy. He represented the U.S. in the Olympics. Last guy to beat Austin Trout. It was in the qualifier for the Olympics, and I mean, if you guys haven't seen the video, it's out there.
I saw it. Yeah, it's crazy.
Vanis drops Austin Trout pretty good in the first round of their fight, and I know Trout's been wanting that rematch for a while. But as far as technical skill, that might be a good one. But if you're going based off of the odds, you might as well watch that Abner Mares and Anselmo Moreno. But I'll try to keep an eye out on both. And don't sleep on Leo Santa Cruz. He's going to be on the Showtime undercard. This guy's incredible. He's a baby Margarito with better defense, man.
Jorge, you think the assignment for Mikey Garcia is still going?
Oh man, it's getting hard to actually keep rooting for this guy just because of the fact. Not anything against his style. It's just because they're not putting any top guns against him, man. And I'm waiting to see that already, and it's just not happening. I think the excitement's still there, but how long can you get it over when you're fighting a guy like Jonathan Barros, who people haven't really seen on TV too much? I want him to fight some of those top guys in that featherweight division. I mean, bring on Orlando Salido already, who they're hoping for at the beginning of the year, or even a Celestino Caballero or someone, man. So, or even Billy Dibb, but right now he's having promotional issues with 50 Cent and Mayweather being split between the two of them. So, it's just really tough to hope for Garcia just because of the fact he's not getting in these fights, but the talent's still there, man.
Good point.
No doubt. I think that's going to wrap up our show, guys. Anything you guys want to add us real quickly before we say goodbye?
I'm good, my friends.
All right, cool. As always, again, you can get in touch with FightFans Radio through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Ustream using FightFans Radio name. This is capital F, capital F again, and a capital R for Fight Fans Radio. You can contact us through Twitter, through @LowBlow, through email, through lowblow505@gmail.com, and through Facebook, through LowBlow Podcast. Just type that into the search and we'll pop up there, which features our latest shows, news throughout the MMA and boxing world, local fight news, weird stuff, anything you want. It will be on our Facebook. And also, you can listen to all our shows on Stitcher. Please check us out, and you'll be greatly rewarded with all our latest shows. I think our last 5 episodes are on there, so please check us out on Stitcher. So for Jorge Hernandez and Will McClary, I'm Justin Goodrum, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.
This has been the Low Blow on Fight Fans Radio, USCombatSports.com, and SouthwestFight.com. We'll see you next week.